Okay, I gotta start before I start, because that makes me laugh. Because it was a beautiful fall day when Matt and I sat down and began to think about January 2024. And I said, I want to do a book of the Bible in January. We started looking at it and we were talking about it. And I started talking about, I said, going through a storm. And I said, what if we did like our graphics and stuff around a snowstorm? Because I'll bet there'll be snow by the time we get to January. You are welcome. You are welcome. The visual aid that many of you had, Antonio Marshall, one of our communicators, teaching pastors here, he texted me last night. His wife took a video of him driving through, and he goes, hazardous conditions. Oh boy, here we go. So we have this, but one of the things, as Rachel already pointed out, when we drive through storms like this, it's very confusing because we wonder, like, can I make it through? Last night, obviously you can. Looks like this coming week we're going to have a doozy too, so that's a bonus. Can we make it through? Do we need to turn around? And we have these difficult questions to understand, but it's true in our own life too. I remember it was almost 15 years ago, I was tasked with leading a church, different state. I was tasked with leading a church, and they were going through kind of some hazardous conditions. The church was declining in numbers. Their finances were a mess. They had debt that was crazy. And I didn't have any prior experience leading and navigating through hazardous conditions. There was games being played that were just, traumatic. I can get anxiety just thinking about which bill are we going to pay this month? Are we going to pay the electric bill? We have another 30 days or 60 days that we can wait on the internet bill. And there was these games that were being played. There were people that were choosing to lead. They were like, we want to reach the next generation. And we started making changes. And then I had some lady came in and she said, we're leaving the church. And I said, why? And she said, because I said, what would happen if we didn't make changes? She goes, the church would die. And I go, yeah, you're right. And she goes, but at least we'd die happy. And I had no experience like leading in hazardous conditions. Even years prior to that, I was a youth pastor, and we had one of these storms that blew up. I had parents of a teenager call me because they were being held at knife point by their teenage son in their kitchen with a butcher knife, and they called me in the middle of the night. And my wife would make fun of me because when I was a youth pastor, I'd get calls sometimes in the middle of the night, and I'd always practice like, hello, 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 hello. Hello, it's 3 a.m. and I've been awaiting your call, right? And she would make fun of me, rightfully for that. And they call me and they tell me like, hey, our son is not doing well and he's got us, he's holding a butcher block and we're kind of hostage in our kitchen. Can you come over? No, call the police. I'll follow them in, right? And dealing and navigating with those kinds of things. I had done other hazardous conditions as well where there's storms and you're like, how do we navigate this? I remember doing a funeral for a 20-year-old who literally drank himself to death in the second floor of his parents' house and having to do those pieces and looking this, and I learned not because I'm smart, I just learned because I had to, that there are certain storms in life that you just can't ride it out. You just can't play the waiting game. You're gonna have to get involved. You're gonna have to make decisions, and you're gonna have to engage in some activities and some actual planning to navigate how do we change course, and how do we know that we've got to maybe do a U-turn, or we need to pull over, or we need to pause for a moment? Because here's the thing, I know this about you because I know this about me. We have all faced situations or will face situations where we have these hazardous conditions, and it's like driving through a blizzard. It's like driving through a blizzard, and it's like you can't see, and you're trying to get your bearings, and you're trying to figure out where the white line is and the yellow dash is, and you turn your brights on, and that makes it worse, and it's very, very disorienting. But maybe it's a leadership position, maybe it's something you have at work, maybe it's your marriage, your finances, maybe it's your personal life. Those are just some of the hazardous conditions that I've been in personally. You may have more and your list may be longer. But when we begin to go through this, what I thought we would do is we want to go and look at the ancient story, some ancient story in the Bible that contains some time-tested wisdom about storms. And not just turning around, but navigating and having some wisdom. Because isn't it true, when you're driving through that, wisdom is like the least thing you have. We panic. We get disoriented. We struggle. We can point and blame. But having wisdom is one of the things that we lack because we don't know, should I keep going? So what I thought we would do this month is we're going to engage in the ancient biblical story of Jonah. And so this picture of Jonah is from a mural in a monastery in Greece. And this story is so great because it's been criticized. I mean, this story has been criticized maybe more than any other. It's been criticized by the scientific community. It's been criticized by skeptics to the Bible, Christianity, Judaism. It's been scrutinized. People have tried to defend its historical record as an actual event. And I just want to be real clear. That is a profound waste of time to scrutinize this as an actual historical event because that's a very flawed approach to this text. No competent literary critic or religious or secular is going to be concerned with the historicity of this story because this story is not written as history. This is not a historical record at all. The Bible is a collection of individual books. Some of them, the Psalms are also, they're not historical history. It's not history. Those are songs. Those are poems. Proverbs is not a historical book, right? It's written for something else. Jonah is written as satire. It's a humorous portrayal of something ridiculous in order to embarrass, humble, discredit, or correct. Now, when you read the story, you go, this is incredible, and it is. It is. But that doesn't mean that we disregard it or that we don't pay attention to it. We do this in other areas, right? Have you ever heard this story? Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, do you believe that? Yeah, it's a good principle to live by. It's a good way to, especially if you're running or you're in a long stretch of life, season of life. How is that story illustrated? What two animals? Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, tortoise and a hare, turtle and a rabbit. Does anybody in here believe that a turtle can run faster than a rabbit? No, nobody believes that. Do you believe that the lessons that you can learn from that are applicable to your life and can make a huge difference? Yes, absolutely. This is the same kind of story that we're dealing with Jonah. There are unbelievable truths that are told in this story that we begin to go to and to say, I'm not saying that the story isn't true, I'm just saying it's beyond this and there's a deeper meaning, there's a deeper illustration, but I don't want you to just discredit the story because you're going, okay, the stomach acid of this fish and in the Mediterranean, and what kind of fish would that have been? Don't get lost there. It's a turtle running faster than a rabbit. There are incredible truths that we can learn from this. And so when we begin to look at this, I want to give you the context of the hazardous conditions in sort of the context of the story of Jonah. This story of Jonah is considered to be a prophetic book. It's one that focuses on God's word spoken through a prophet, and Jonah is one of the only stories that we have that focuses about a prophet, and the story is structured like a 2-act play. Each one containing 2 radically different scenes. So in chapters 1 and 3, we see this is about the word of the Lord. 1 and 3, the word of the Lord comes to Jonah, and there's an external turmoil that begins to take place. Then chapters 2 and 4, so 1 and 3 are kind of linked. Chapters 2 and 4 are linked together, and Jonah cries out, and the word of the Lord comes to him, and we see an internal turmoil. So first we have external turmoil, and then that highlights the internal turmoil that will take place. And today we're going to talk about Act 1, Scene 1, Jonah 1, and we're going to read through about 1 through verse 5 on this great story, and we're going to look for these pieces that begin to come out of us. And we're going to walk away with some very practical wisdom, like slow and steady wins the race. So, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. The name Jonah actually means dove, so we have this symbol of peace, symbol of innocence. Amittai means faithfulness. So this peaceful person is a faithful person, and the writer of Jonah opens up stating that the Lord has come to this peaceful, innocent man who is characterized by faithfulness. And the audience knows something's coming because the description is actually very sarcastic. So, verse 2. This is the word of the Lord. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. So Jonah does something that is contrary to what this is. There's a problem, and Jonah runs away from the Lord, and he headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship that was heading for a port, and so after paying the fare, he went aboard this ship, and then he sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. So there are some pieces, and I want you to look at the map about where we are in Bible land here so that you can look at this. But when we look at the map, Jonah is in Joppa, and he's supposed to go up. God has called him to get up, go up, get up, go up, and he does not. I mean, he makes this decision that maybe you would have thought that, there's been at least two reasons why he probably does not go up to Nineveh. One, the Assyrians are up there, and they've been terrorizing the Israelites for years. In 2 Kings, it tells how the Assyrians invaded Israel, and they deported people, and they laid siege. Another reason is, would you rather go hang out in northern Iraq or the coast of Spain? There's a practical reason for here, right? Where do you want to go vacation? I don't think I'm going to think about that too long. But what we see is the story begins to elevate a spiral that takes place. There's a downward spiral, and Jonah begins to go, and he goes from Joppa, and listen to this, verse 4. Then the Lord, he gets on this boat, and he's heading over, goes down to Joppa. A great wind on the sea and such a violent storm blows up that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each one cried out to their own God. So like everybody does throughout all history and all time, when there's a problem, what do? You pray to your God. Oh God, oh great something, help me, save me, help me, help me. I haven't been spiritual, but I am now. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten up the ship. So they cried out to their many polytheistic gods that begin to take place, and they're desperate. They're dumping cargo, trying to lighten the load, trying to keep themselves, save themselves, and then they're trying to keep the ship afloat, which is the opposite of what Jonah's doing. Jonah has now gone below deck, where he is laying down, and he fell into a deep sleep. And this is often what happens when we're confronted and we're in a hazardous condition, is we kind of avoid reality. And so, you can't get lower than that. He's supposed to go up to Nineveh. He goes down to Joppa. Then he goes down in the bottom of the boat. Then he lays down in the bottom of the boat. And then he is in a deep sleep in the bottom of the boat. And he has chosen to defy what God told him to do, and God told him to do, and he is neglecting his responsibility. He's going in a different direction, and he's trying to hide. He's trying to hide out. He's trying to escape the fallout, and what he wants to do ultimately is he wants to hold on to his secret. And secrets have a way of controlling you in a way that you want to keep them hidden. And at this point, Jonah's the only one that knows why they're in the middle of a bad storm. The only one. So let's not paint the picture that Jonah goes down to the bottom because he's laying down because he's tired. He's trying to go into a deep sleep, which is like choosing to ignore and deny, and let's not deal with reality. I don't want to deal with reality because it's just too bad. Maybe if I sleep, it'll go away when I wake up. You ever done that with a problem? Maybe I'll sleep, and tomorrow that problem will go away. So instead of doing that, he decides to try and survive, and he just kind of keeps going. He's trying to defy it. He's trying to escape it. He just wants to survive, and ultimately he wants to deny. And this pattern right here is what plagues relationships. This pattern right here is what causes issues in marriages, organizations, teams, careers, your finances, your mental and your emotional health. Most likely right here, you've seen this pattern play out with a friend, maybe a spouse, partner, coworker, employee, maybe your boss, kids, maybe even your parents. Because this is a pattern that we repeat, and it's repeatable in our life because we think that we can get out of situations based off of our own intuition or our own strength. And we look at the situation and go, uh-oh, this isn't good. I don't know what to do. So instead of engaging, I'm just going to escape. I'm going to try to escape my pain. I'm going to try to escape reality. I'm going to try to escape what I need to do. In fact, I'm going to try to hide and maybe cover up what's actually going on. And we're often left with the fallout or the consequences of this, and we end up stuck. We end up stuck in a situation that we can't get out of. So we try to deny that it really exists, or we play it down and go, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's okay. And so when he gets all the way down to that point, that becomes Jonah's wake-up call. And all of a sudden, there's a change in the story, and it's open your eyes, son. This problem ain't going away. This is what's going on, and it's your decisions that have caused this issue. Oh, I don't want to have it be my fault. I want to blame somebody. I want to excuse my way out of it. So this is ironically that I think the other irony in the story is there's only one person on the boat that's not praying to their God. The prophet. Everybody else is praying to a God, some kind of God, something. The prophet isn't doing anything. He's hiding out. He's hiding. And I think the first thing that we've got to do that I've kind of learned over the years is that when you're in a storm and it's bad and you don't even know what to do, is you got to wake up, man. It's time to wake up. Let's go, verse 7. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let's cast lots. Cast lots is an ancient way of drawing straws. So let's cast lots to find out who's responsible for this calamity. They want to know who did. Well, the lot falls on Jonah. They cast lots, and the lot falls on Jonah. So they asked him, hey, you got the short straw, son. Tell us. Who's responsible for making all of this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Now he gets, customs questions. What kind of work do you do? Where did you come from? What's your country? What people are you from? We obviously don't know enough about you before we allowed you to board our ship. And it's clear there's something more going on here than what is typically known. And what are you going to do about it? And so there's this sense of responsibility that he has, and he's caught, right? Jonah gets caught. He's backed into a corner. And we want him to own up to what he's, doing. So this is what he said, verse 9. He said, I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, the God who made the sea and who made the dry land. Well, now they're all terrified. After his questions, interrogation goes, this terrified them. They go, what did you do? If your God is the sea God and who created the sea and the dry land, what did you do? They knew at this point he was running away from his God. So you have a whole group of people who are ticked off at him because he knew he had disobeyed, and then he decides to get on his boat. You got on our boat. What'd you do? So scene 1 continues. There's a confrontation between Jonah and the ship captain, verse 6. The captain went to him and said, how can you even sleep, man? The sea's getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, what should we do? You tell us. What should we do to get out of this mess? What should we do to make the sea calm down for us? And he tells them, verse 12, pick me up, throw me into the sea. And he replied, and if you throw me into the sea, it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Now, Jonah's not being heroic here, so let's save the medal for another situation, but he's looking for a way out. He still doesn't want to face what's happening. Jumping off the boat is an escape. That's not dealing with the problem. So here's what he tells them. Go throw it overboard, let me go. And I want to pause here for a minute because so many of you in this place is where people get stuck all the time. They don't want to deal with it. And you also don't want to bear the burden and the weight of dealing with this problem all by yourself. So here's what I want you to know. If this is you today and you're like, man, that is me. Some days I just wish, I just want to jump off the boat. Here's a little secret I want to let you in on today. You have specifically been prayed for before you even walked into the room today. There's a group of people that meets on Sunday morning even before the services start, and they've prayed for you. They don't know what you're carrying. They don't know what burden you're on. They don't know the status of your relationship or your finances. But they've been praying for you today, and even for this particular moment. It's no accident that you're here or you're watching online, because navigating a storm is so difficult, but you need to know that there is the kindness of God that has already surrounded you. So I just want to be so bold as to say it's maybe time for a new strategy for your storm. Before it gets so vicious that it gets worse. And it takes you out and those around you out. Verse 13, instead of throwing Jonah overboard and letting him have an easy escape, the men did their best to row back to land, but they couldn't. They could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, Lord, please don't let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased. So these polytheistic, non-Israelites are trying to discern what the Lord God of creation is trying to have them do. They're trying to better communicate and understand what the Lord of the universe is wanting them to do and begging for his mercy that they would be understood. So verse 15. Then they took Jonah reluctantly and they throw him overboard. And the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. What do you mean they made vows to him? They made vows. God, I'll never do that again if you make this problem go away. God, if you help me, I'll never. That's what you mean. They made vows. Many people of faith, people of non-faith, have come to this kind of this critical moment in their life. Some people call it a Jesus moment, where they come and they begin to say, God, if you rescue me, I'll worship you. But I think there's a deeper meaning that we can go into this, because navigating a storm always begins with a reversal of your current pattern, your habits, your plans, or your current direction. And so I want to look at some things that begin to change, because all of a sudden Jonah begins to wake up. Then he changes his head. He's been looking down for who knows how long, right? He's been looking down, and then he starts to own up. And the first thing that the shipmaster tells Jonah to do is to wake up. Like, wake up. Has anybody ever told you, wake up? Like, wake up. Have you ever told anybody? Have you ever wanted to tell somebody? You want to tell your spouse, you want to tell your kid, you want to tell your boss, wake up. They're not sleeping. They're just like in a fog or something. And you're like, are you aware of what's going on here? Wake up to the reality of the truth of what's taking place, because you need to begin to call on God for his strength and his help in this. Finally, what happens is then you need to own up and tell somebody and be honest about what's going on and stop hiding. Here's the first step. You got to figure out where you are before you can figure out where you're going to go. If you don't know where you are in this mess, which means you're going to have to deal with some facts. What have you not been doing that you know you should have been doing? Oh, I will someday. Right. Well, that day's today. I mean, have you been acting unethically or for personal fear, doing something in failure? Have you been engaging, in stuff that's leading you in a wrong direction? Or maybe you've been medicating, or you have some unhealthy habits that you just use it to escape, and you may not even realize you're doing it. You think you got it under control. It's not even a problem. Those around you know that you do it all the time, and this is the first step, and the first step is always scary. It's terrifying, which is why we let things continue to deteriorate. But you can't possibly imagine what God has been wanting and waiting for you on the other side of obedience. Wake up. Open your eyes and face the truth. Waking up, looking up, owning up, facing the truth is your slow and steady wins the race. Deny, 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 pretend, pretend, lie, lie. And so when the shipmaster says, Jonah, it's time to face up. You need to, this storm isn't going away. It's going to knock us all over. You're white-knuckled at the wheel. You're driving through this thing. There's black ice underneath of what you're driving on. You can't even see this. And you go, how can I practically take a step when I'm so terrified? And we learn in this story, if anyone who's ever turned around and you've talked to them and they've learned it's worth it, usually there's a trusted friend that has said, hey, you need to wake up. And invite them, not to punish them, invite them to look up. Look up. I know you're embarrassed. Look up. You need to wake up and just own it. And you may not have been in Jonah's shoes, or you may not, but all of us have had this moment where we've needed to wake up from some stuff that we've just been denying, putting off. However big or however small. And this morning, as we kind of kick off this series, and we'll continue next week, we're going to go from chapter 1 to chapter 2. And we're going to continue to learn this, because here's what I know about you, and here's what I know about me. We've all had storms. Some are bad. Last night, not bad, right? Not bad. Inconvenient. But you still had to make the choice. Am I going to go out to the store tonight to get whatever you got to get, or am I going to stay in? Am I going to ride it out? Or do we need to engage what's taking place? And I just want you to know, as you wrestle with that, even for the next couple minutes, that you have been prayed for, and your Heavenly Father doesn't want to say, ha, 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 I gotcha. Sin already got you. A lie has already gotten you. He wants to help you. He wants to help you. We'll dive into this a little bit more next week. Can I pray with you? And then after I pray, the band's going to come. And while they're playing, you're free to light a candle. If you're in a situation where you're like, oh boy, if you only knew, I know. If you look around to your left, your right, and behind you, every around you has got a you only knew story. If you want to pray, if you want to take communion this morning at one of the stations, if you want to write a prayer on the cross, or if you want to light a candle, you're free to do that. Can I pray with you? Father, today, some of us have been denying or ignoring the storm that we're in, just thinking, it'll get better. Man, when 2024 starts, it'll be better. Well, how? God, would you help us to quit going down, and would you help us to stop and change our eyes and get our eyes up on you, who wants to love us back to you. Love a relationship, love a difficult situation, but help us to confront reality that, this is a storm, and help us to not keep it to ourselves. Find a trusted, don't post it on social media, but Lord, help us to find a trusted friend where we can share what we're going through. Jesus, would you guide us and love us best this morning as we sing songs and respond to you? It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. If you're ready to take your next step, I would encourage you to text GP Next Step to 97000. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next Sunday.